Hi, I'm Sydney, and today I'm going to be talking about Hulu's The Act, Episode 3, 2 Wolverines. So kind of obvious warning here that this whole video is spoilers, so if you haven't seen it yet, go ahead and check it out. It is streaming on Hulu. I'm kind of surprised this week that they only released one episode because I guess that they must have just done 2 for the premiere week, but we'll see what they keep doing. This week's episode 2 Wolverines really took a look at the romantic interests for both Dee Dee and for Gypsy, as well as took new leaps and bounds for Gypsy's search for her independence as well as her maturity. Essentially, we're just seeing Gypsy's longing to be a woman and her taking those baby steps to try to not be seen as a little girl anymore. At the beginning of the episode, we see her watching videos again about like kissing and stuff. She's gonna go to a cosplay convention and she wants to wear this older costume, bell costume that fits a little bit tighter, so it's a little bit like sexy looking. And then there's that moment at the convention as well when like the first moment that she gets away from her mom, the first thing she does is like spots a guy that she wants to flirt with, and in that moment she like pulls down her shoulder sleeves, and in that moment I literally sitting on the couch was like, dang, like girl, get it, like she knows what she's doing. In general at the convention too, you just see this side of her that's so kind of confident and freeing, and it just feels like this is a place for her where she can be more of a truer version of herself. Now, her going to this convention is a really pivotal point for 2 reasons. Number 1 is that she meets Scott, but it's not that she meets Scott, it's that he is the one who influences her to create her fake Facebook account. And if you know anything about the trial, the fake Facebook account is what essentially leads to the murder of Dee Dee, because on that Facebook is where she ends up meeting Nick Godejohn. Second is that this is the moment where she realizes she doesn't really know how old she is, like for sure. For me, I was really frustrated for Gypsy, but also I was just like, wouldn't you think this would be a red flag for her to be like, this is wrong? But then I have to take a step back and remember that this is what she's been raised with. She's been raised most of the time being very misinformed and given little information about a lot of things. So to her, like, this is normal. But this new search for her womanly identity is what leads her to finding an identification card thing that it reveals that she is actually 19. When this was revealed, I was tripping. I thought, oh, you know, she's probably really 17. But then I was like, she's 19? It even makes her baby talk kind of that much more unsettling. It's not her fault though, because she's being made to feel like a child still. Her mom is still shaving her head in the sink in this episode too. This realization from Gypsy ends up leading her to run away to go meet Scott, who's at the emergency room. And so she goes in and she's wearing this red wig. And then this was another pretty heartbreaking moment. I'm not gonna like blame the healthcare system, but one of her doctors just like looks at her and does not even recognize her. While I want to blame things for that, I also couldn't say that if I was in that situation, I'd be like, what'd she do? I don't know if I would recognize her either, you know, but it's very frustrating. I want her to be seen in that moment. In this particular moment though, we are seeing a side of Gypsy that we haven't seen before, because in episodes 1 and 2 she is very fragile and scared and doesn't want to let her mom down, but at this point she's like, screw it. Her running away totally has me rooting for her, and it's so bold and brave, but I'm also waiting for it to just kind of go wrong. We also see the extent of the trained wrongness within her when she says to Scott,
you don't need to tell them the whole truth when you're in pain.
Oh, Gypsy, no. You can see that she's coming from good intentions, but she clearly doesn't understand that lying to doctors like that is wrong. It's just kind of what she's used to. And you're also seeing this desire from her to want to take care of Scott, and you see her wanting to be on the other side of the caregiving aspect of being the caregiver. Gypsy ends up going home with Scott, who is like a man. He's an actual man. And there's this kind of awkward undertone to the whole thing. I feel bad for him because he's just kind of confused. He's like, Gypsy's walking. And in general, Gypsy's social skills aren't the most normal. In general though, you do feel the sincere love that is between them. And okay, so an important moment here was when Gypsy says,
wouldn't it be great if Jean Grey could be taken away from the evil Cyclops?
And then Scott says,
you know she kills him in The Last Stand.
Foreshadowing. It's kind of obvious and maybe cheesy in the moment too, but like watching it, it felt appropriate. And Scott and Gypsy end up kissing, and then of course her mom comes in to ruin it. She takes her away and ends up telling Scott that Gypsy's 14, which is obviously a lie at this point. And that whole scene was just super heartbreaking. Now looking at Dee Dee, we already know from episodes 1 and 2 that she is complete trash. We are also reminded by this at the beginning of the episode when she's opening donation letters and she's not even reading the letters and she's just like taking the money. We also see the continued constant manipulation of Dee Dee to Gypsy with phrases like,
"You are my angel, you protect me and I protect you."
And then at one point she's saying,
"You can't rely on any man, but you can only rely on your mama."
And her voice is really starting to annoy me a little bit. It's very drony and sing-songy, southern, blah. It's probably the bias of it also being her, but I'm just like, shut up. I even wrote as a note at one point when I was taking notes watching it, I was like, voice is so annoying, I want to punch her in the face. She ends up making Gypsy change her costume to Cinderella, and then she pulls her shoulders up at the convention, and she's just like being controlling as usual. In this episode though, we do get to see a glimpse of the humanity within her, but it is still very selfishly driven. Dee Dee also meets a man at the convention named Russ, who's played by Dean Norris, who was in Breaking Bad, which I loved. It was so good. Russ is a really nice guy with good intentions who's experienced the death of his own son, and for some reason he's very desperate to pursue Dee Dee. That really confuses me because, like, why does he like Dee Dee? I get that she has that initial southern charm kind of soft thing about her quality, but she's not reciprocating any of the come-ons that he's giving her, so I'm like, stop. He keeps emphasizing to her that she needs to make some room for herself in her life because all of her attention is going towards Gypsy. But of course, in knowing the truth, like, his good intentions are worthless because her whole setup is self-driven. So, and even though she's not reciprocating any of his advances, we still see that she secretly loves the attention. The moment that he offers to come visit and he wants to help take care of Gypsy with her, she's just like, done. And what I didn't like about this scene is that she's on the phone with him and then she's also like grinding up pills or something for Gypsy, and you see her face go from like just pleasant normal and then it's just like, ooh. So I felt as a spectator I didn't need to be spoon-fed that much connective tissue. Like, I already understand as the viewer that she's dug herself in this deep of a hole that if he were to get involved, she would be exposed. But I didn't need to see her like in the act, like, as it's happening. In general, the show does kind of do a lot of spoon feeding of some of the information with a lot of foreshadowing dialogue and the visuals that play out with the dialogue. Kind of like I mentioned in episodes 1 and 2 with like the way that Mel spoke, it just felt kind of, ugh. That's also just me being very picky. I personally like to connect a lot of pieces for myself and don't want to be told every single part of the story, if that makes sense. With that being said though, here are some things that I really did like about this episode. Cinematography wise, I loved the transition with the flash between the DeLorean and Gypsy and Scott getting their picture taken into the crime scene photo. I just thought that transition was so smooth, and at that point I was really invested with what was happening in that moment, that when it took us to the next place, it felt very organic and exciting. With that being said, I thought that the flash forwards in this episode felt very effective without being too long and without giving away too much, but it gave us enough information that later it helped us to understand what was happening then. The most heartbreaking moment for me, which is the stuff that I love when I can be invested enough that it's affecting me emotionally in that way, was when Dee Dee made her get in the wheelchair to go back in the house, because she had said to Scott at one point, you know, I'm never getting back in that thing, and then you can see that control, and it's silent. It's like a silent rage that they have with one another. She just looks and she just is like, you're getting in that chair, without even having to say anything. And that devastation on her face just sitting there, it's just like, oh no. And then finally, the very ending with that dolly camera bringing it all the way back from the house and the music kind of coming to a climax, it really felt like, okay, about to go down. And then lastly, a few things that I wasn't really a fan of. The first one being kind of controversial maybe, is that Joey King looks very thick to me in a healthy way. Not fat, she looks healthy. particularly when she's laying on her stomach on her computer. I thought to myself, wow, her legs look like really thick. But as far as I understand, Gypsy is supposed to appear as this very like tiny, malnourished, childlike looking figure. And her being maybe looking more healthy, Joey King, isn't the issue, but it's the fact that Scott comments to her when she's at his house. He mentions that she's very like small looking because she's standing, but I was like, no, she's not. Like, I'm watching, she doesn't look small. Like, she's a little short, but like not even. And it's not even that I'm saying, oh, she should have lost weight for the role. Not necessarily at all. I think her acting is strong enough to be able to hold up that childlike quality in her acting. But in the writing, they shouldn't have had Scott acknowledge her build when it's just not true. My second one was the fact that Gypsy knew her dad. And again, it could be really easy to nitpick this show and go, this is what really happened. This didn't happen. But I understand why they didn't include him for story purposes to drive the plot forward. And even at the end of the episode, they have a disclaimer saying that things are altered and stuff. But my hang up is when things are lied about as opposed to just fictionalized or chosen to be left out. So I understand when characters are added to fill a certain role that needs to happen, or when characters are left out because they don't contribute, but when they just lie about something, I feel like they could have maybe done that differently, because he was a role in her life even though he wasn't there all the time. Overall, I'm really invested in the show at this point, and especially where they left off, I'm anxious to see where it goes from here, because I feel like it's like, okay, here we go. The Act is streaming on Hulu with new episodes every Wednesday. If you liked this video, subscribe for more content, or you don't have to. You can do whatever you want, but thank you for watching.